I do believe that the presentation done by my dear colleague Hannah said it all. Our business model is broken. And I do believe that we Africans, we need to face it. We need to call, in my opinion, for a reset, a rebooting of the policy making in Africa. Something is missing in this equation. And I'm really happy that Her Excellency, the Deputy Chairperson, in her remarks, she called for the need to review business as usual. Actually, it's a strong call that the Secretary General has been saying over and over. Business as usual, for a couple of reasons, even at the multilateral level, has not been working. If we agree with me that there is a strong need to reset, to reboot, and to restart policymaking in Africa, I would like to bring to this exercise 4 conceptual notions that I do believe that we need to introduce in the policy-making production process in Africa. 4 conceptual notions, and these are basically my remarks. The first conceptual notion is that policy-making in Africa needs to distinguish generation of resources from mobilization of resources. These are 2 different animals. I have been saying, and this is in the report that has been recently approved by the General Assembly, Africa loses $500 billion annually. The breakdown is in the report, is there. Africa loses $500 billion annual. I've been saying that over and over in the past, I would say 1 year. We cannot lose what you don't have it. Artificial intelligence has not addressed that yet. So if Africa loses $500 billion, it's because Africa has been able to generate $500 billion. Africa has not been able to mobilize the $500 billion. So, and this distinction is important because the policy mix to address lack of generation of resources is completely different from the policy mix that we need to address, let's say, the mobilization of resources. And the difference, and the fact that Africa generates, but has not been able to mobilize what Africa generates, I do believe that at the end of the day, we do have a question of mindset that has been driving policymaking in Africa. This is the first conceptual notion that I'd like to bring. The second conceptual notion that I believe we need to factor in the policy-making production process in Africa is that Africa has a liquidity problem. Africa has not a solvability problem. And this is also an important distinction. Again, the policy mix to address liquidity issues are completely different of the policy mix required to address solvability issues. Completely different. And I will give, again, let's go back to this magic number of $500 billion. Africa loses $500 billion on an annual basis. In 2022, Africa's public external debt was $644 billion. So we have $500 billion that we lose on an annual basis, which is a flow, against a stock that is $644 billion, which gives me a payback period of 1 year, 0.2. So this tells me that yes, has a liquidity problem, because if you lose $500 billion, any household would have a liquidity problem. But we do not have a solvability problem because we prove that we can generate resources. We generate and we lose them. So, and this distinction between liquidity and solvability credit rating agencies have not been processing it. Credit rating agencies have not been making this distinction towards Africa. And this is important because in this context, so made in Africa financial solutions must combine two dimensions. The first one is the policy mix direct to deal with the basically stress situations of national treasuries, the liquidity problem. But also, we need to come up with a policy mix to unlock countries' solvency protection. The third conceptual notion that I believe we need to bring to the policy-making production process, we need to make we need to agree that acceleration is not possible without resilience. Yesterday in a VNR, we reached the midterm of 2030 agenda. We are completely off track, Anna. Anna told us, correct? We are completely off track. And it seems that you are panicked. And you start talking about it. Let's accelerate. But in the case of Africa, I have the impression, and I'm going to repeat what I said yesterday in one of the sessions, that we are in a Ferrari without tires. Can you accelerate a Ferrari without tires? I don't think so. Because we need to also acknowledge in a very open way that we have not delivered the Millennium Development Goals, the MDGs. Africa has not delivered. So Africa has not built resilience to be ready to implement the SDGs. And Africa has not built resilience to be ready to accelerate the SDGs. And again, I go back to the policy mix. The policy mix to build resilience is completely different from the policy mix to accelerate. Completely. And I will give you an example with school feeding that I used in Cape Verde a couple of times. So, from a policy mix standpoint, we know that resilience paves the way to a policy framework for acceleration. Let's take the example of school feeding. So, during resilience, school feeding needs to be financed by ODA, as today. Countries have no policy space to finance school feeding. But during the acceleration phase, school feeding cannot be financed by ODA. It should be financed by budget revenues. So the difference. The same program, but a different finance structure. During the resilience period, is ODA to come up, to scale up, but then down the road, budget revenues need to take over. Second example, very quickly, public goods, land access, water, energy, to address the non-monetary poverty. As you know, poverty has a monetary dimension and non-monetary dimension. So a non-monetary dimension is when public policies address land access, water, energy, etc. So, and of course, to address the non-monetary poverty is essentially a feature of the resilient phase. If you don't do that in the resilient phase, you will not be ready to address acceleration. But during the acceleration phase, once you have delivered resilience, your policy mix needs to change to financial inclusion, expansion trajectory, feeding middle class, market scale, a different package, a different package. The fourth conceptual notion is that in policy making, to survive, and again, I'm saying that because I did when the subprime hit Cape Verde in 2008, when the external shock hits your country and you are there to deliver, you have a short-term period to identify three things. If you don't identify these in this short-term period, I don't know if you'll be able to cope with the external shock. The first, you need to identify in your country a game changer. Second, you need to identify a driver. Third, you need to identify the enablers to activate the game changer and to unlock the driver. I do believe and I have been saying that, allow me to repeat, the game changer in the case of Africa is the need to shift the paradigm of financing for development. As I said, Africa already finances more than 75% of its own development. It's not ODA, it's not FDI, it's our own resources. So we need, in terms of game changing, we need to recognize that domestic resource mobilization, not revenues, domestic resource mobilizations are the game changer. Drivers, I do believe that everybody agrees that is energy. Without energy, we don't go. And enablers, as my dear colleague Hannah mentioned, as well as our Excellency, the Deputy Chairperson, are institutions, country systems, these intangible assets. And of course, digital transformation is there to help you on this. Of course, with the adoption, and this is the last part of my statement, with the adoption of these four conceptual notions into the policy-making production process in Africa, I do believe that we can get ready to start challenge the global narrative on Africa's debt. This is a short-term homework. We need to challenge the global narrative on Africa's debt, particularly if we factor the conceptual notion 1 and 2. And I will finish with the following sentence. Yes, Africa is in debt distress. Everybody agrees. But Africa is not in debt distress because as over-debted. No. 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 Please do not accept this narrative. Africa is in debt distress because Africa does not control its own economic and financial flows, which is different. And I ask to myself, the debt to GDP ratio, 65%, 70%. But you need to build everything from A to Z. We have nothing. But only 7%. Let's compare to Japan. Japan has built everything. You dream Japanese. You dream Japanese. And the ratio in Japan is 200%. How come I have to build everything in my country, in my continent, and I'm over debt, and Japan has built everything with it 200%, is not over debt? You need to work hard to convince me of that. So I do believe that, yes, we are in debt distress, but we are not because we are over-debted, but because we do not control our economic and financial flows. And this brings me that, take account that in the past 40 years, Africa has undergone approximately 320 sovereign debt restructuring exercise. 320 sovereign debt restructuring exercise. I do believe that we need to also challenge what the global narrative is being adopting as debt sustainability. First, debt suspensions should be designed as initial steps of debt restructuring, which is not the case so far. Second, debt restructuring should be designed as pieces and components of domestic resource mobilization reforms. Only then debt restructuring will serve the debtors and not serve the creditors. Thank you very much.